Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. The Pakistan Army says its forces have foiled plans of hostile agencies to radicalize the youth in the country, giving an overview of the dividends earned through Operation Facade, which was launched 4 years ago. Director General of ISPR, Major General Babri Iftikhar, said this operation was not area-specific and its domain extended to the entire country. He said terrorists and extremists are rendered completely ineffective by curtailing their freedom of action. He said 353 terrorists were killed and several others were arrested as part of the operation since 2017. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, Italian Ambassador Luca Atanasio and 2 people traveling with him have been killed in an attack on a United Nations convoy. It was not immediately clear who was behind the attack. The United Nations has called on Myanmar military to stop the repression immediately and release the prisoners. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres' statement comes as a general strike is being observed in Myanmar to oppose the coup. Thousands of protesters have gathered across the country despite the military ruler's threat that confrontation would cost more lives. Iranian lawmakers say Sunday's agreement between the government and the UN nuclear watchdog is illegal and the president must be punished for it. The parliament passed a law last year to restrict nuclear site inspections, but the new deal allows for the necessary verification for up to 3 months, though with less access. The World Health Organization says the coronavirus outbreak will end in early 2022. WHO's director for Europe, Hans Kluge, said the pandemic will still be prevalent in 2021, but more manageable than the last year. Globally, the virus has claimed over 2.4 million lives and infected more than 111 million people so far. Pakistan has reported 16 deaths overnight, the lowest number of fatalities since the second wave started in the country. And in the Pakistan Super League, Quetta Gladiators have set a 179-run target against Lahore Qalandars at the National Stadium in Karachi. Chris Gale remained the top scorer with 68 runs, while Haris Rauf picked 3 wickets for Qalandars. Qalandars won their opener against Peshawar Zalmi, whereas Gladiators lost their first match against Karachi Kings. Those were the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now to the news in detail. The Pakistan Army says its forces have foiled plans of hostile agencies to radicalize the youth in the country. In a press conference in Rawalpindi, Director General of ISPR, Major General Babri Iftikhar, gave an overview of the dividends earned through Operation Facade. He said the intensive nationwide operation has successfully thwarted hundreds of terrorist plots across the country since its launch. The DG-ISPR said in the past 4 years, over 375,000 intelligence-based operations were carried out. He said Pakistan's enemies are engaged in a massive propaganda campaign to obstruct its prosperity. To a question, he said the country's peace is directly linked with peace in Afghanistan. He added tribal areas have now been brought into the national mainstream thanks to the National Action Plan. He went on to say that 353 terrorists were killed and several others were arrested as part of the operation since 2017. And for more on this, we are joined by Lieutenant General Naeem Khalid Lodi, retired. So thank you for your time at Indus News. First of all, the military says Pakistan's strategy in the war against terror was based on 4 concepts. The first, clear; the second, hold, build; and the last one, transfer. Would you shed a little bit of more light on this?
Thank you very much. Just to elaborate, that clear means that actual fighting and clearing the area from all the miscreants, from all the negative forces. Then it is hold, which means that you stay in that area and make sure that nobody comes back, and you build confidence of the people so that they can come back in those areas. And then, of course, these two are the responsibilities of the armed forces. Then you have to be there and develop the area. Then, of course, the political forces, they have to come in, and then they need to develop it. And in that also, military can give a helping hand. So overall, all-encompassing, it means that clearing the area, making it safe for the people, and then later on helping in the development works. This is what I think he meant by saying all this.
General Lodi, the military reiterated that Pakistan has no favorites in Afghanistan, and the only objective of Pakistan is to bring peace to the war-torn country. How will you explain this?
Normally we were being, you can say, there was a finger pointing that we are harboring certain terrorists, and there are terrorist camps and all that. But later on, history proved, and although even those who were actually maligning us, they themselves came out very clearly that no, Pakistan was not involved at all, and all this thing was, being perpetrated by some other forces, and Pakistan was clearly redeemed as far as this thing is concerned. So, we Pakistanis believe that peace in Afghanistan means peace in Pakistan, and we cannot afford to have any favorites there that's siding with somebody or helping somebody against somebody else. Because ultimately, in the long run, the people of Afghanistan have to decide their own fate, and we will just help them. We can assist them, all right. We can bring them on talking terms. We can do all this. And I think the clear example is that in spite of this act, that we keep on facing some difficulties as far as, some terrorist camps are concerned across the border in Afghanistan. But you must have noticed that, especially recently, we have never blamed the Afghan government for doing all that, and we are also trying to assist Afghan government and Afghan Taliban to talk to each other, to bring them on table. So we do not take sides, because taking side would mean that we will become a party, and becoming a party would mean that in the long run, probably it will not be a peaceful Afghanistan. So that is what I think went from this.
Lieutenant General Naeem Khalid Lodi, so thank you very much for talking to Indus News. We really appreciate that. And let's talk more on this with Lieutenant General Ghulam Mustafa, retired. So thank you for your time at Indus News. Operation Raddul Facade has completed its 4 years today. How do you see Pakistani security forces' success in the operation?
Pakistan has come a very long way. Those of us who have seen it happening to Pakistan, and then Pakistan's response starting 2008, 2009, there's been very tough, very, very demanding journey from there on. And as DG said, from terrorism to tourism, it's not been easy. People of Pakistan have sacrificed a lot. We lost a lot of very valuable lives. And that, I think, is something to be grateful for. Second thing, which I think is a very important thing that DG brought out, was that it was not possible unless people of Pakistan was totally with and standing with the Pakistan Armed Forces. That, I think, defines the Pakistan Army. That defines Pakistan. That defines Pakistan's the main strength, after, of course, belief in Allah Kareem. And the third thing is that starting from 2008, where Pakistan was scared, the world was scared, we were actually being dubbed as the epicenter of terrorism in the world. Today, you find that the world is now coming back to what is Pakistan's reality. It's real. It's a very important country in the region. The connectivity is critical. Sports is coming back to Pakistan. Tourism is coming back to Pakistan. And Pakistan's economy, which has actually touched rock bottom, is now recovering. Slowly, it's a painful journey. Slowly, but it's doing that. And overall, if you see that the peace in Pakistan today is something that we have started taking for granted. And those of us who have been through this, they can tell you that it wasn't so always. And I think that's the highlight of today's briefing. But also we must remember that the journey is not over. And the war that Pakistan is now subjected to has many wider dimensions, like cyber warfare. There, Pakistan has still to come up to speed and meet the challenges that we are faced with. The Pakistan that is being pressurized from, let's say, from India across the border, and India using, another country is using Pakistan's soil to undo what Pakistan has done. That I think is something that we need to be on the guard. And also we need to be on the guard with regard to how our social media domain is being used or misused for and against Pakistan. And I think all in all, we can take a lot of heart from it. And we can also be grateful to Almighty Allah. But more importantly, we must continue. This is what I think was the crux. Finally, before I sign off, I think you must have noticed that the DGISPR was deliberately avoiding stepping into what is civil government's domain. It deliberately opted not to answer the questions which are purely in the civil government's domain, highlighting this fact that the armed forces of today recognize the civilian supremacy, and that is how I think it should be. And that is what people of Pakistan, and that is what distractors of Pakistan armed forces must understand.
General Mustafa, the government's writ has been imposed in tribal areas. Well, over 300 terrorists were neutralized. What is your take on elimination of terrorism from Pakistan?
We have done the major work. Now it's time to, wrap up. It's time to, we can't lower our guards because the threat from across the border and the enemy from within is not yet over. And all those cells, sleeper cells, have not been eliminated. But terrorism, as it was about 15, 16 years back, is now down to about, I think, if you scale of 1 to 100, if it was 100 at that time, it's now something like 5, 6. Obviously, we're taking casualties. Our soldiers are still in the field, sacrificing themselves for the sake of our people and the country, Pakistan. That is something that we must understand, that this is an ongoing, tough state where the last-ditch battle is probably going on. It may take some time, but inshallah, Pakistan is out of the woods and into the sunshine.
Lieutenant General Ghulam Mustafa retired. So thank you very much for talking to Indus News. We really appreciate that. Now, moving on, Pakistan's Army Chief General Javed Bajwa has discussed the Afghan peace process with Qatar's Special Envoy of the Minister of Foreign Affairs. According to military's media wing, the two sides also exchanged views on the regional security situation. General Bajwa said both the countries share cordial relations and a deep-rooted spirit of brotherhood. For his part, Mutlaq bin Majid al-Qahtani appreciated Pakistan's continuous efforts for peace and stability in the region. The visiting envoy also pledged to keep working for better relations between the two countries. Director General Inter-Services Intelligence, Lieutenant General Faiz Hamid, was also present in the meeting. Indian occupation forces continue to carry out raids and crackdown operations in many parts of occupied Kashmir. They conducted house-to-house searches in different areas of the Budgam district. The troops also launched a massive cordon and search operation in the Shopian district. They have arrested a youth in Pulwama district. The personnel forced local shopkeepers to close their outlets. Meanwhile, the All Parties Hurriyat Conference has called for a shutdown in the valley on the upcoming visit of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. In India, a court has sent 21-year-old climate activist Disha Ravi to one-day police custody. 22-year-old Ravi was arrested earlier this month on charges of sedition after she posted a document supporting farmers' protest. The toolkit document came into the limelight after global activist Greta Thunberg shared it on Twitter. The protests are now in their third month, but the Modi government has yet failed to end the deadlock. Recently, many prominent politicians and celebrities, including pop icon Rihanna, voiced support for farmers. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, Italy's ambassador Luca Attanasio and 2 people have been killed in an attack on a UN convoy in the eastern part of the country. Local officials say the convoy was attacked during an attempted kidnap by unknown assailants. Italy's President Sergio Mattarella has denounced the attack as a cowardly act. It was not immediately clear who was behind the attack. Attanasio had been Italy's head of mission in Kinshasa since 2017 and was made ambassador in 2019. The United Nations has called on Myanmar's army to stop the repression immediately and release prisoners. Secretary General Antonio Guterres was speaking to the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva. The UN chief said they see the undermining of democracy, use of brutal force and arbitrary arrests in Myanmar. Guterres said serious violations against minorities, including ethnic cleansing of the Rohingya, must end. Earlier, the US said it will continue to take firm action against Myanmar's authorities over the violence. Meanwhile, a general strike is being observed in the country to oppose the February 1st military coup. Thousands of protesters have gathered despite the threat of more violence by the military rulers. Iranian lawmakers say Sunday's agreement between the government and the UN nuclear watchdog is illegal and the president must be punished for it. A majority of lawmakers voted to send a report by a National Security Committee for a judicial review. The report shows the deal between Tehran and IAEA violates a law passed by the parliament last year to restrict nuclear site inspections. The new deal allows the necessary verification for up to 3 months, though with less access. A senior White House official says the U.S. has begun communications with Iran over its detention of American citizens. In an interview, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said the U.S. will not accept unlawful detention of its nationals. Meanwhile, Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson said Tehran has received messages from Swiss embassy and other states to pursue this issue. However, Saeed Khatibzadeh debunked the claims of direct talks with the U.S. He reiterated that Iran's policy is to get its prisoners released in the U.S., adding that Iran is ready to address the issue. The UN's envoy for Yemen, Martin Griffiths, has expressed disappointment over lack of any progress in the latest prisoner exchange talks. Griffiths urged the warring parties to continue discussions to expand the arrangements for release of more detainees. He called for unconditional release of all the sick, elderly and the children detainees, as well as civilians, including women and journalists. The latest round of UN-backed negotiations for a prisoner exchange ended without a deal. Yemen's internationally recognized government and the Houthi rebels blamed each other for the lack of progress. In January, the negotiations began in Jordan with the aim of freeing a total of 300 prisoners on both sides. The Israeli army has detained 20 Palestinians, including a Hamas leader, from different areas of occupied West Bank. In a statement, the Palestinian Prisoners Society said several other influential personalities are also among those detained. The Israeli army frequently carries wide-ranging arrest campaigns across the occupied West Bank. Nearly 4,400 political detainees are languishing in Israeli jails, including women and children. China has called for a reset in its relations with the United States. Speaking at a forum sponsored by China's foreign ministry, top diplomat Wang Yi described the bilateral relations at crossroads. Wang urged the U.S. to respect China's core interests and stop spearing the ruling Communist Party. He called on Washington to lift restrictions on trade and cease interference in the Chinese territories. Wang added the two powers can work together on global challenges if they repair bilateral relationship. He reiterated that Beijing was ready to reopen constructive dialogue with Washington aimed at solving problems. The relations between the two countries remain strained over a host of issues, including trade, pandemic, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Xinjiang. Germany has urged the European Union to prepare sanctions on Russian officials over the jailing of Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny. Berlin's call paves the way for curbs to be imposed next month in a strong message to Russian President Vladimir Putin. Ahead of the EU foreign ministers meeting in Brussels, German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas said he was in favor of preparing additional sanctions and listings of specific individuals. He added that the bloc needed to maintain a constructive dialogue with Moscow, even as the relations hit a low. Top EU diplomats will also hold a video call with US Secretary of State Antony Blinken later today. Uganda's opposition leader Bobi Wine has dropped a legal challenge to presidential election results. In a news conference, Wine said the Supreme Court judges who are hearing the case are biased. He said the judges have been in contact with the president, Yoweri Museveni, since he filed the petition to overturn the results last month. Incumbent Museveni was declared winner of the January 14th election with 59% of the votes. Wine rejected the results, accusing Museveni of rigging the poll. Human Rights Watch also noted that the poll was characterized by widespread violence and human rights abuses. But Museveni dismissed the allegations and said the election was the most independent and fair since independence from Britain in 1962. The World Health Organization says the coronavirus outbreak will end in early 2022. WHO's director for Europe, Hans Kluge, says the pandemic will still be prevalent in 2021, but more manageable than the last year. Globally, the virus has claimed over 2.4 million lives and infected more than 111 million people so far. More in this report.
The number of new coronavirus cases in the hardest hit areas around the world is decreasing. However, the new variants are causing the cases to flare up in many other regions. In Britain, more than 17.6 million people have received their first dose of a COVID-19 vaccine, while daily deaths and cases also slipped. In Italy, a top virologist has warned that coronavirus cases are rising again largely due to the more transmissible variant first detected in the UK. Meanwhile, the United States COVID-19 death toll is approaching 500,000, with President Joe Biden planning to memorialize the lives lost. The U.S. infectious diseases official Dr. Anthony Fauci said Americans may still be wearing masks in 2022.
We are still at a level that's very high. What I don't and none of my colleagues want to see is when you look at that slope to come down that it say, wow, we're out of the woods now, we're in good shape. We're not, because the baseline of daily infections is still very, very high. It's not the 300 to 400,000 that we had some time ago, but we want to get that baseline really, really, really low before we start thinking that we're out of the woods.
Japan's vaccine rollout has encountered problems only less than a week after it was launched. Meanwhile, quarantine-free travel from New Zealand to Australia has resumed ahead of a downgraded alert level expected in Auckland today. Australia has started its mass COVID-19 vaccine program as the country looked set to report no local cases for the third straight day.
It gives me an assurance that I am actually protected in any instance. If anything happens, I know that I'm actually protected. So it gives me a great confidence that I can actually walk into those sites and do my duty as normal without any fear and go back to my family, making sure that I'm not going to be passing them anything.
India's COVID-19 death toll is approaching 11 million mark as Western Maharashtra state is set to impose new restrictions in 4 districts. Meanwhile, in a report, World Bank said Palestinians' COVID-19 vaccination plan faces a $30 million funding shortfall.
In Pakistan, 16 people have died of coronavirus during the past 24 hours. It is the lowest number of fatalities reported since the second wave of the outbreak in the country. The last time the country reported 16 deaths on 17th of October. The country's death toll has jumped to 12,617. The ministry says 1,160 tests came out positive yesterday. Meanwhile, there are more than 24,000 active cases in Pakistan at present. President Arif Alvi says Pakistan wants to further enhance trade and economic relations with Japan. He said this in a meeting with the Japanese envoy Kuniori Matsuda in Islamabad. Alvi added that Pakistan attaches great importance to its ties with Japan. The president highlighted the investment potential in Pakistan and urged Tokyo to benefit from the country's various sectors. The Japanese envoy congratulated Alvi over the recently concluded multinational maritime exercise AMN 2021. Matsuda said the exercise brought different countries to work together for collective purposes. The United Nations Refugee Agency has called on states along the Andaman Sea to immediately rescue the stranded Rohingya. It said the boat left the coastal district of Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh about 10 days ago and experienced engine failure. The UNHCR said it believed some passengers had died, with fatalities rising over the weekend. Coast Guard officials said the boat had been tracked and was reported to be safe, but they did not yet know the condition of those aboard. The Rohingya are a Muslim minority that has suffered persecution in Buddhist majority Myanmar. Many have fled in rickety boats in the hope of reaching Malaysia and Indonesia. In Algeria, thousands of people have marched across the country to mark the second anniversary of the Iraq protest movement. The movement ousted veteran former President Abdulaziz Bouteflika in 2019. The demonstrations come a week after the protest in the town of Jakarta was held to voice support for the Iraq movement. It is the largest protest since rallies were suspended in March last year in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Protesters say they want a civilian state and the rule of law in the country. The Iraq movement has called for the complete removal of Algeria's entrenched political elite. In Haiti, hundreds hit the streets of the capital Port-au-Prince demanding President Muizs' removal from power. This follows an escalation of the constitutional crisis in the Caribbean country. The demonstrators call Muizs a dictator, supported by the US and other international organizations. They vow to continue their struggle until he was removed from power. The opposition claims Muizs should step down as his 5-year term in office expired on February 7. But the president argues he took power in February 2017 and will step down next year. In Indonesia, thousands of residents are being evacuated on the outskirts of the capital Jakarta amid flooding. The Disaster Management Agency says more than 28,000 people were affected in Bekasi and Karawang districts. Officials say the embankment of the Citarum River broke, which resulted in floods. Earlier, 5 people were killed in the severe floods that submerged entire neighborhoods in Jakarta. Thousands of houses in the area are covered with 100 to 250 centimeters of water and are without power.
We are asking people who need evacuation to find a safe spot so that they can immediately be evacuated from the disaster site. Then the elderly, children and pregnant women who also need to be carried out will be prioritized as the next step.
Thousands of people have fled to temporary shelters as the tropical storm Dujan submerged dozens of villages in the southern Philippines. Country's disaster risk management agency said 2 regions, including the country's nickel mining hub of Caraga, were hit the hardest. It said the floods also damaged some houses and bridges in the province of Surigao del Sur. The bad weather also prompted the cancellation of at least 36 domestic flights. Philippines Weather Bureau said heavy rains are expected to continue over Caraga and several other provinces today. The United Arab Emirates has signed arms deals worth $1.3 billion with multinational military enterprises. The agreements were inked on the first day of the 15th International Defense Exhibition and Conference in Abu Dhabi. Over 900 defense companies from more than 50 countries and the regions are participating in the 5-day event. The world's top military companies, including from China, have brought their latest products at the event. They exhibited cutting-edge technologies in the international military and innovative defense fields. The exhibition also includes several activities, including aerobatics and a dynamic display of equipment. However, due to COVID-19 outbreak, the number of exhibitors is smaller than the last year. Israel has closed all Mediterranean beaches as an offshore oil spill deposited tons of tar across more than 160 kilometers of coastline. The Environmental Protection Ministry is trying to find the ship responsible for the spill. Officials said the spill is the worst ecological disaster and will take months or years to clean up. They said the event began last week during a winter storm, which made it hard to see the far approaching and deal with it at sea. The deposits have wreaked havoc on local wildlife as a dead young fin whale washed up on a beach after ingesting the viscous black liquid. United Airlines says it is grounding 24 Boeing 777 airplanes with the same type of engine that suffered a failure after takeoff on Saturday. This comes after the Federal Aviation Authority said its inspections will require some planes to be temporarily grounded. In a statement, the authority said it will step up inspections of 777 aircraft with Pratt & Whitney 4000 engines. United Airlines said it will work with the U.S. regulators to ensure the aircraft meet rigorous safety standards. Boeing has also recommended suspension of use of its 777 jets with Pratt & Whitney 4000 engines. Meanwhile, Japan has asked all airlines using Boeing 777s with the same engine to avoid its airspace. A 139-year-old house in San Francisco has been moved 6 blocks away from its original location on a truck. The move was made possible by an extensive team of engineers and construction workers. The mint green Victorian house was loaded onto a flatbed truck and moved to a new location. Spectators turned out to cheer and take pictures as the 5,000 square feet house began its journey. Construction workers were needed to cut back branches so the house could pass down tree-lined streets. The cost of moving the 6-bedroom house was roughly $400,000. Local media reported that a developer planned to build an apartment building on the site where the house once stood. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. A 14-year-old girl in the United Kingdom has undergone a new type of heart transplant that is gaining popularity around the world. Freya Headington had a successful operation after the new technique reduced her waiting time for a heart. More in this report.
In August 2019, Freya Headington was diagnosed with restrictive cardiomyopathy, which can cause tiredness and breathing problems. Doctors proposed using a new procedure to help the girl reduce the waiting time for a transplant. Thanks to the program, Freya got a new heart in only 8 weeks. The teenager left hospital 10 days after her operation and within months. Her father is delighted after she again started doing the things she loved most.
Ecstatic that I got such an amazing gift of a heart, but it's also upsetting to know that someone also died.
It'll always be there in the back of our minds, but you know, we know now she's got a lovely, healthy heart, and her future's bright.
The procedure, which started in Cambridge, can retrieve donor hearts that stop beating on their own after life support is withdrawn. A special device is able to restart the heart and ensure it is healthy before it is transplanted into a patient. In 2015, the hospital in Cambridge became the first in Europe to transplant adult donor hearts that had stopped beating on their own. For a few years, the procedure was exclusively helping adults in need of transplants. However, the Royal Papworth Hospital and Great Ormond Street Hospital is now ensuring that children can also benefit from it.
For many of our transplant patients now, they're so sick that they have to wait in the hospital for their transplant, sometimes for 6 months, perhaps even over a year. So not only is it reducing wait times, but it's transplanting patients that otherwise would not get an organ.
6 of the new types of pediatric heart transplants have taken place in the UK in 2020. Only 4 others have been carried out worldwide.
A koala in Eastern Australia has received the world's first prosthetic foot especially designed for him. A local dental prosthetist designed the foot fitted onto the animal. What in this report?
Triumph, a male koala, was born without a right foot. He was rescued in 2017 in northern New South Wales by wet nurse Marley Christian, who found him next to his dying mother. Christian became his primary carer, and Lismore's Friends of the Koala Centre was searching for the solution to his missing foot.
With the bone, it's sort of protruding, so it does give him a fair bit of discomfort. So he needs that extra, some sort of padding there to alleviate that. It also helps him to climb.
A U.S. company which specializes in animal prosthesis was unsuccessful after several attempts to design a foot for Triumph. John Dolman, the local dental prosthetist, then volunteered to build the koala a working foot. His design was successful and the new prosthetic was fitted onto Triumph earlier this year.
He's very lucky that he has a little bulge at the bottom of his leg, which is probably the beginning of his ankle. So this actually fits over that little bulge and the Velcro holds it on. It's got a bit of tread on the bottom for walking around and doing a bit of climbing.
Dolman is currently in the process of improving his design for the artificial foot. Triumph, who is nearly 5 years old, will need to spend the rest of his life in captivity, most likely under care.
And now the business updates. U.S. stocks have declined as a continuous rise in bond yields dented the appetite for risk assets. Wall Street's major indices are currently in the red. The Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P 500 are trading lower by about 0.5%. The Nasdaq Composite has shed about 1%. Meanwhile, oil prices rose amid a slow return of the U.S. crude output cut by frigid conditions. Bitcoin has hit another peak, rising above $58,000 as it continues its strong momentum this year. The cryptocurrency has risen more than 90% since the start of January, pushing its total market value about $1 trillion. The recent spike has been fueled by Tesla and other big companies accepting it as a payment. However, Bitcoin has a track record of wild price swings and has fallen sharply a number of times since it was created in 2009. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. With the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.